Hey you guys, it's Peter and welcome to my channel, Peter Watches TV. And today I want to talk about the new documentary about Herb Baumeister and Fox Hollow Farms called Fox Hollow Murders, Playground of a Serial Killer. I am very, very excited to do my coverage of this new true crime documentary series. For those of you that do not know, this is a case that I have followed, for the last 30 years. I feel like those of you that only watch this channel of mine, I kind of need to give a little bit of background history on my involvement in this case, my involvement in the story before I get into my reaction to this documentary. If I don't think it'll make a lot of sense. So I'm just going to give a brief kind of history of my interest in the Herb Baumeister case and the victims of Herb Baumeister, and my involvement in all of it and what I know about the case before I get into my reaction to the documentary. I do want to say that on my Peter Mon channel, I have done, I think, like 8 or 10 specific videos just about Herb Baumeister and Fox Hollow Farms. On my vlog channel called Peter Vlogs, my #1 most viewed vlog over there is a paranormal investigation that I actually did with 2 friends of mine and a group of paranormal investigators at Fox Hollow Farms. So that is my #1 most viewed video over on Peter Vlogs. I will link some of those videos in the comment section below. But over on my drama video channel, my Peter Mon channel, just the other day, I did a reaction to some things that I knew before the documentary came out because I wanted to say those things on film. So let me go back in and kind of give you guys the history of my interest in this story. So I am 52 years old and I am from Indianapolis, Indiana. I live in Indianapolis, Indiana with my husband. I came out when I was 18 years old, which was in 1990. At that time, the I-70 murders, which have also been put on Herb Baumeister, were occurring off of I-70, which runs through Indiana into Ohio. Those were occurring, and then later, between the years of like 92 to 96, were when the Fox Hollow murders had occurred. And that was where Herb Baumeister was going to gay bars in Indianapolis. I think the 4 gay bars that he was specifically going to, which were Greg's, which is back in the day was called Our Place, or we called OPs. They show all these bars in the documentary. The Varsity, the 501, and the Metro. The Metro and Our Place, which is Greg's now, still exist. The other 2, the Varsity Lounge and the 501, which was actually a leather bar, those 2 bars no longer exist in Indianapolis. So at the time that he was picking his victims up from gay bars, I was going out to these bars. I was going out to these clubs with my friends. I also got sober December 17th of 1994. So at that time was a time when I was, leaving late at night, drunk, going, home by myself, sometimes with other people, that I was in the middle of the night, so for me, at that time, I could have been a victim of Herb Baumeister's, and I think that was something that was like always very scary to me after the fact. So, at that time, the culture in the community of Indianapolis, and it talks about this in the documentary, was that there wasn't a lot of protection around the gay community. Indiana is a very, very conservative state. The north side of Indianapolis, and they talk about this in the documentary, Hamilton County, which is actually where I grew up. I grew up in Carmel, which is, my house is probably, that I grew up in, is probably a 10-minute drive to where Fox Hollow Farms is. And it is a very conservative county, and it holds Carmel, Westfield, Noblesville, and it is very, very conservative. And so there was, Indiana at that time was leaning very anti-LGBTQI+. I had friends of mine that were involved in situations. I had a friend of mine that was shot in the head. And it was a hate crime, and the police didn't really get that involved. I had another friend of mine that was a lesbian that was beaten up in an alley right by a gay bar. The police didn't really get involved. That was kind of the culture that we lived in back then. And I don't think that Indianapolis was isolated to that kind of hate. I think it was something that was nationwide. I think there were some areas that were safer than others. But, that was definitely something that was going on, and that was definitely the culture of Indianapolis at the time. And so I got sober, like I said, in 1994, and then I can remember after that, at the time that Herb Baumeister took his life, I can remember seeing it all go down on the news. I can remember going into bars at the time and seeing the missing flyers on the bar. They show a lot of that in the documentary, but I remember the missing flyers. In fact, I was just talking about it on my vlog the other night before I watched the documentary, that I can remember one of the bartenders in the documentary, he says that they would tell people, like, if you're going to go home with somebody, let them know who you're going home with. I remember that being a big thing in Indianapolis at the time. I can also remember that there were flyers that were up that said things like "be safe" on them. They didn't show me those flyers in the documentary, but I remember those flyers being up next to the missing things like "be safe," people are going missing, and things like that. It was definitely something that was talked about at the time. But the thing was, and it was interesting because in the documentary, he talks about how when people started going missing, they didn't know if maybe they had, passed from AIDS and things like that. Except for that, I came out in 1990. When I came out in 1990, it was kind of it was still in the middle of the AIDS crisis, but people were not like dying at the rate that they had been before I came out. And I remember I came out on the tail end of the AIDS crisis. I remember going to bars and there being like every bar across the bar, everywhere when you go in, they would have like plastic packets that they would hand you that had like flyers in there. They had condoms, they had all these like safety issues and things like that. And the bars would be like huge bowls filled with condoms and stuff like that. I don't really remember, and this was also the time that I was like drinking heavily and using a lot of drugs. I don't remember that people were associating the missing people with the fact that I don't remember that ever being discussed, but he says it in there, so there must be some truth to that. But I don't remember that people going missing was related to this person went missing, therefore they possibly passed from AIDS. I do remember that it was talked about that a lot of people that were sex workers in Indianapolis, people that were transient, people that were homeless, that those people were getting targeted. And I remember that the word on the street was people that won't be like found, like people that nobody will miss is who like this person is going after. I don't know that we even used the word serial killer. I just know that we knew that people were going missing and nobody really understood why. And so it was a very, very scary time, But, so I remember after Herb Baumeister passed away, I followed, like, the news coverage about it and all that kind of stuff. And then, and this is after, I got sober, because like I said, I got sober December 17th of 1994. So 94 all the way through the end of 95 into 96 was really my first year of sobriety. And I was really focused on sobriety. So I wasn't going out to bars. I wasn't going out to clubs. I was kind of removed from all of that. And so I remember my roommate and I, she and I were watching an A&E special. It must have been the one that came out in 1997. Apparently there were two of them that were on A&E, because the one that I watched was called something like The Wife of a Serial Killer or something like that. And it was about his wife, Julie. The second one that they showed is the one that had Mark Goodyear, who is supposedly the one survivor of Herb Baumeister, that has been known as the one survivor of Herb Baumeister for all these years. So I can remember watching that documentary and I got very, very interested in it. Years later, when I started my YouTube channel, I did some video. It was like my very first video ever talking about it. And I did some video talking about like I may have met a serial killer, just talking about how I had been at the bars, the same bars that he was at, that he was like, lurking in the background, the dance floors, that we were, all out there dancing and stuff like that. And then like I got some people that reached out to me. And so I made like a follow-up video to that. And then my friend and I were at, I don't really remember the timing of all this. I would have to go back and watch all the videos. But anyway, I think it was then that I was reached out to by this paranormal investigation team in Indianapolis. And they reached out to me and said, we've seen that you've made several videos on Herb Baumeister. In all of my videos across the board, the one thing that has been so important for me in talking about is that it's been really important for me to talk about the importance of the victim stories being told and that their families finally finding out the truth of what happened to their loved ones. I think that there are stories, it's really, really important for their stories to be told. So that's been something that I've been consistent about across the board, why I've kept this story alive. Because in all honesty, until this documentary came out, not really anybody's talking about Herb Baumeister. When I watched the Cross TV series on Amazon, based on the Alex Cross novels by James Patterson, they mention Herb Baumeister as one of the serial killers in there. They mention Herb Baumeister. I was blown away because Herb Baumeister is almost never mentioned when his supposedly victim count is 40 to 60 to 80 is what I've heard. So it's astronomical, or it's unbelievable to me that this astronomical amount of victims, and there's no focus on her Baumeister as a serial killer. What I started hearing about at that time when I was reached out to by this paranormal investigation team was that there was a possibility, and I just kind of heard rumors about this at the time, that there was a possibility that there were a team of people that procured these victims, and that it wasn't just her Baumeister, it was actually a group of people. So I was reached out to do this paranormal investigation at Fox Hollow Farms. So I took my friends Melissa and Aaron with me. Melissa and Aaron have done a lot of Ghostbuster kind of things. They went to Waverly. They've done a lot of those ghost adventure things. And so they were like, I didn't want to go by myself. I was terrified to do it. I brought like smudge spray. I brought black tourmaline, my cross, my St. Christopher medal. I was terrified to do it. And so we went out there, and the people that we did it with were very, very nice. I will tell you that, somebody asked me the other day, they said, do you still have a way to get onto Fox Hollow Farms? And I said, it has a lot to do with how I do my review of what I watched in the documentary. But I'm just it's always been mine to share my truth on here. When we went, the owner of the house seemed very bizarre to us. And the owner of the house at the time is the owner of the house that is in the documentary. I think his name is Rob. Rob seemed bizarre to us, okay? First of all, when we went in the house, and I talked about this on my vlog last night. I talked extensively, if you want to hear more about it, on my vlog last night, my experience with this. I've talked a lot about it on my Peter Mon channel. I just linked all the videos over there. But when we went to the house was so coated in dust. Like the TV, all the TVs in all the rooms had like a coat of dust on it. The bathroom had a coat of dust. It didn't look like we like moved like a cologne bottle in the bathroom, and it looked like it hadn't been picked up in probably a year. The dust wasn't just like they needed somebody to come in and dust. It was like nothing had been moved in a year. It looked very staged. And in fact, he would point things out, and he would say, well, that was in the house when her Baumeister lived here, or that was in the house when the Baumeisters lived here. And so it was bizarre to us that this whole new family had moved in there under the precept, or the premise that they just wanted to kind of like, they said in there that the reason why they do it is because they didn't want looky-loos to come around and look at the house and stuff like that. But they did charge us $20 each to go to the house. And I think there was like 8 of us total. What's interesting to me that I forgot, and I went back and I watched my vlog, and it's not in there because I cut a lot of footage out because the owner was like saying people's names like that I couldn't have on video, was that he kept on saying to us that the one sole victim who he was friends with that came out to the house a lot, which I didn't know at the time, whose name was Mark Goodyear, that Mark Goodyear was going to possibly stop by while we were there and like tell his side of the story. And that was one of the things that he said. I have that footage. I have all of that footage from that house somewhere. There's so much that I didn't include. What was interesting to me was that at the beginning of my vlog, he says in there, please do not record and show, he had all the crime scene photos, and he said, and he told us personally, there are stories I'm going to tell you that I don't want you to include on video, because I was the only one recording, and I was like, that's totally fine. So I cut a lot of it out. He showed those crime scene photos in the documentary. It's still an open investigation. That was his reason that he used for us not taking pictures of it at the time. So I have that footage. All I have to do is find it. I have no problem coming out with that footage because it makes the owner look very speculative. I don't know what kind of deal he and Mark Goodyear have going on, but in retrospect, having been out that house, which was 7 years ago. It'll be 7 years ago this August. When I was watching the scene, and Mark Goodyear, he is gives the wife a hug. The wife never came down and met us. She was upstairs in the loft bedroom the entire time, and she just kind of shouted down at us. At one point, she was watching TV. She never came out. When she's at the top of the stairs and Mark Goodyear gives her a hug, I was like, I got goosebumps. I was like, they are friends with this man. Mark Goodyear, when they talk about Mark Goodyear coming out there, that he takes his shoes off, he almost sees the place as sacred ground. I was like, they made it very apparent to us when we were at Fox Hollow Farms that he might stop by, that he stops by all the time. Why would the one survivor want to stop by the house all the time? That's something that he told me 7 years ago in a vlog, and now it's coming out in a documentary, and he's hugging the wife like he knows her. He's like, oh, Vicky, and all this kind of stuff. The one thing that I have on video, and I have it on the footage, is that the owner told us at the time that his plan was to open the place up to tours, and that he wanted to, he and his friend that's also there that used to live in the house wanted to do a documentary and write a book about it. So insinuating basically that they bought the house to make money off of it. He acts at the time, and he acted then, and he acts in the documentary like he didn't even know it was, that there was a serial killer that was owned the house. There is not anybody, I'm telling you right now, and I know what the owner does for a living, and he is somebody that interacts with a lot of people. I mean, he is a salesman. He interacts with a lot of people here in Indianapolis. Okay, a lot of people know who he is. There is no way you could pull anybody off the street in Indiana, let alone the north side of Indiana, and say, do you know who Herb Baumeister, Fox Hollow Farms is? Literally everybody would know. I saw all these memes come up last night, and it would say, like, people in Indianapolis watching this documentary, and it would be like cats behind doors, because everybody here knows the story. My cousin is a realtor, and I was talking to her yesterday because we go on this, like, one day a week. She comes and picks me up for Cousin Fun Day. And so I was talking to her yesterday, and I said, do you have to let people know that they died in your house? I can't remember what she called it, but she called it psychological something. She said, you have to let them know if they ask, if something happens in the house. But one of the things that she told me was, right up the street from where I live, there was a pastor and his wife that were killed by this teenager, like, in the late 80s, and my aunt actually sold that house, and my cousin Caroline said that the new owners asked, it's like 3 owners later now, but they actually asked her, and my aunt had to, like, provide all the information and tell them what happened, because she asked. But if they don't ask, they don't have to tell you. There's no way that he bought that house, he and his wife bought that house, and didn't know they were buying Herb Baumeister's house. Everybody knew what Fox Hollow Farms was. I knew what it was in 1996. There's no way that he did not know what that house was. He acts like he didn't know that he was buying a serial killer's house. The whole thing is just, with him, is so bizarre. He tried to make, like, all these excuses for Mark Goodyear, and, like, at first, he's like, oh, no, like, he's a really good guy, really believe him, then backed up in his story. There's some deal. I don't, like, that, even to me, the implication of that, because I don't think he has anything involvement whatsoever in the original thing that happened, but his involvement with Mark Goodyear now is spooky strange to me. I don't understand it. And so we went out there and we did the paranormal investigation. So then we come back, I post the video. Then what happened was, I'm in a 12-step program. I'm sober by way of a 12-step program. I try to say this in all my videos. That's just the way that I got sober, and I am sober. There are a lot of ways to get sober. I respect all those ways. I just don't want addicts and alcoholics to die from drug addiction and alcoholism. So I was at a meeting with my best friend, and my best friend Tanya, and I ran into a friend of mine that I used to party with back in the day. I hadn't seen him in years. We were sitting out there talking, and my friend Tanya said, because I had just gone to this paranormal investigation thing like a month or two before, something like that, and she said, I am so glad that neither one of you ever ended up at that Fox Hollow place and that serial killer didn't get you or whatever. And he said to me, he looked at me and he goes, do you not remember? He was like, we went out there for an after party. And I was like, what? He was like, yeah. He was like, I had this gold lame, blah, 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 whatever. He was like, and then it was you and me, and he said this other guy's name. When he said the other guy's name, I was like, oh my God, because the 3 of us used to always go to after parties together. I hadn't thought about this guy in years. Made a video about that. You can fact check it. It's from years ago. In this documentary, when the one guy implies that there are groups of people that come out there for after parties, I was blown away. I had never heard that before I watched this documentary. This documentary confirmed so many things for me that I've heard through the years. Okay. So I did another video and I talked about that. Well, through the years, I continued to do updates. I have a friend of mine that I have known for years and years and years that does not live here, lives out of state, reached out to me. He was at an event, okay? And what's so strange about this is that he has nothing to do with Fox Hollow Farms. He's not gay. He wouldn't know any, the victims. He doesn't know anything really about this case. And so he was at this event and he ran into somebody that said, oh, where are you from? He's like, I'm from Indiana, blah, blah, blah. They were talking about, like, horror movies and interest in horror movies and things like that. And the guy said, do you know about Fox Hollow Farms? And my friend said, oh yeah, like, I know about it. I don't really know much about it. And he reached out to him and said, I have a source, a third source, or third party person that would love to talk to you to share their story to clear their conscience. The person that he ended up talking to is Mark Goodyear. Who I call my source. All my friends laugh. It's my friend. My friend has, like, all these audio tapes of Mark Goodyear saying to him 2 years ago, okay, 2 or 3 years ago, supposedly, that it was actually a group of 4 to 6 people. It was a team of people that would procure the victims, pick the victims out, that one person would go and get the victim, bring them back to Fox Hollow Farms, and that it was basically that they were, like, doing snuff films. I've said this for years. Before the documentary came out, I've been saying this for years on videos, okay? I want to make sure that people understand that I'm not just saying this in reaction to this documentary. So basically, it was a group of very prominent people, okay, not just in Indianapolis, but across the country, that were doing this huge cover-up, okay, and that Herb Baumeister was the one that eventually, by taking his life, supposedly, Mark Goodyear says in there's no way he could have taken his life because he says something about his fingers being fat as sausages. There's no way he could have pulled the trigger, insinuating that somebody else took his life. Okay, well, Mark Goodyear told my friend 3 years ago that he didn't take his own life and that it was somebody else that was in control of this whole group and actually gave this person not a real name, but called him something and said that it was a group of 4 to 6 people that had been hired to procure this so that people could come and watch, basically like live snuff films is what it was, which is probably what was on the videotapes, okay? I came out with videos and I said that. After I made that video a year and a half ago, I started getting contacted by people left and right, okay? Wanting to tell me their story, wanting to tell me this story. I had people reaching out to me that told me that, I have the most bizarre stories from people that they've reached out and told me. That friend of mine, he has audio files, okay, of an interview that he did with Mark Goodyear that match, everything he said in there matches exactly what was said in the documentary. But there is so much that he left out. And in fact, I did my video yesterday, and my friend told me, he said, if Mark Goodyear gets in this documentary and tells them what he told me, the FBI will be on his doorstep before the first episode is over. Those were his almost exact words. What was interesting to me in Mark Goodyear's interview, which the whole documentary kind of leans to that, is that Mark Goodyear says, this is going to be the last time I ever do an interview, the first and last time I ever do a sit-down interview. He's never shown his face before, okay? Which my friend is now looking into doing a podcast. He wants me to do a podcast with him about this or write a book. I have no interest in writing a book or whatever. But he has found out where Mark Goodyear to him insinuated that Julie knew about the relationship between he and her Baumeister and she didn't like it, okay? And that what was interesting to me was that there were so many missed stories about this, and that he never wanted to show his face on camera because he was so afraid for his life. And he even says it in a book that was written 12 years ago, okay? And what my friend said to me is, if everybody is dead, if her Baumeister's dead, why is he afraid, and why is Julie afraid, okay, for her life, that they're both saying in this book that they're afraid that people will come and get him? Who? Her Baumeister was supposedly the sole serial killer. If this wasn't a group project and people weren't killing people together as a group, like Mark Goodyear suggested to my friend, then why are Julie and Mark Goodyear, who's the supposed boyfriend of her Baumeister, why are they afraid? But Mark Goodyear has his opportunity to get on camera, and then he does this song and dance and says, he says, this is the one thing, he says at the beginning of the interview, ask me the names, ask me what you want to ask me anything, I will share it. Then when they ask him things, he goes, that's for another time, that's for another story. He's trying to string this out because he won't tell his stories. This documentary so implicated Mark Goodyear in this case, and I'm not the only one I can tell you, I got so many direct messages. I have probably gotten more direct messages about this documentary than I've gotten about any single thing that I have ever talked about over 7 channels on my YouTube channel, okay? And everybody was like, Mark Goodyear did it. Mark Goodyear's an accomplice. Mark Goodyear's part of it. Mark Goodyear asked in the documentary, what does the audience think of you? That's what the audience thinks of you, that you implicated yourself in the murder of these people, okay? That's what the audience thinks. So, after I came back, I had all these sources that reached out to me. Well, I also, in the last 2 years, I had 2 documentary teams reach out to me, all right? And they both wanted me to be, because I had come out with these videos before this, right? And they both wanted me to be in these documentaries sharing my story about how I had gone to these places in Indianapolis. As soon as I came out with the videos talking about my source material of talking to Mark Goodyear, they both said that they didn't want me to be in the documentary anymore. They wouldn't tell me why. They just said one said that they weren't going to do the documentary anymore because another documentary outbid them. The other documentary group told me they were going in a different direction. Now, having watched a documentary, I do not believe that either one of those documentary production companies are the ones that did this documentary. So I went into this documentary thinking that it was going to be another cover-up story, another one where they basically showed all the footage of gay men deserve this and blah, blah, blah. That was not this documentary. I also thought that it was going to be very much a reliving of everything that had happened. I didn't think there was going to be any new information. They were going to throw Mark Goodyear, the one surviving victim, in the last 10 minutes, and that was all we're going to see. That was not this documentary. This is going to stop in a minute, so let me stop it now before I get into this. Okay, this documentary was so fantastically done. I was so scared watching this documentary. I actually watched the first part, and I knew I wanted to take a nap that night and get up and just really focus on it. So I watched, and I didn't take any notes on this. I mean, I was focused. I watched the first episode, laid down, took a nap, got up, took a shower, got cozy, got comfortable, I sat down. I was so scared watching this documentary. I was looking out the windows. I was checking doors. We got cameras all around our house. I was making sure the cameras were on. I was so scared watching this documentary. It takes a lot for me to watch a documentary and get scared. The first thing that I noticed is that I don't know where they got the coverage, but if you go online and you look on YouTube for the two A&E documentaries that they did, the footage is so bad that they must have gotten original footage from the A&E special. So really what the documentary is, okay, it is a combination of the two A&E specials. It is also a combination of a documentary that is on YouTube, which is scary but very poorly done, which is called The Haunting of Fox Hollow Farms, and it's about the paranormal aspect of Fox Hollow Farms. And then there was also a documentary that was put out, I think it was a year and a half ago, and it was put out by, I believe, WTHR in Indianapolis. It is probably, besides this documentary, the most fantastic documentary that's ever been done, and there's very few about her Baumeister. Oh, I also have a true crime book club, and in the true crime book club, we read the book that the owner wrote, that he co-wrote with Roger Eastep. We read that book. It was really poorly done. I'm very versed in this case. Like, I know everything about this case like the back of my hand. So the documentary that came out with WTHR was really highly focused on the victims. The sister that worked for her Baumeister that's in this documentary, she was highlighted. Alan Livingston's family was highlighted. It really was focused on the victims. It was so fantastically done. So this documentary, it was kind of a combination of all those previous documentaries. And then it enters in the new Hamilton County Coroner, Jellison, okay? Now, I will tell you what I have heard behind the scenes, that there are a lot of powerful people, prosecutors, councilmen. When Jellison said in the documentary that a councilman reached out to him and said, why are you reopening the case? We've already spent enough money on this anyway, and he's dead. That was like chills up my spine, okay? Because I cannot tell you how many people, I've heard councilmen, prosecutors, judges, I have heard powerful rich people in the area all through the country have all been involved. That is one of the reasons why this case has been so suppressed for so many years. I've had so many people that have come to me and said, you should not be talking about this on camera, okay? Like, you should not be talking on camera. I have told so many of my loved ones, if anything ever happens to me, it's because I've talked about this case. So there has been a huge push to suppress this case. If anybody is going to solve this case, it is this Jeff Jellison that just came out in this documentary as the Hamilton County Coroner. He is the first person that has ever insinuated that there is no way that her, up till this documentary, there is not one person in any documentary, in any book, in any article of any prominence, okay, that has ever insinuated that there is no way that her Baumeister could have done this alone. That it had to have been at least, and he even says in there, one or two people, okay? Then they hire this guy from Colorado, who I absolutely loved, okay? Reminded me kind of like Paul Holes from the Golden State Killer. And this guy solves cold cases. And he comes in, he starts reading all the interview transcripts, and he's clocking stuff left and right with these people. When they talk about the shooting that occurred on the back patio of, I mean, it was so bizarre. The whole story of her Baumeister coming out there with like this mask on and this trench coat, the whole thing was so bizarre that who would make up something like that, right? Like, sometimes when things are so bizarre that they don't make any sense, there has to be some truth to it. The ending of it, I don't know how Mark Goodyear is like, I almost kind of feel like this documentary was not just to bring more attention to this story, but was to get people to come out and talk about what they know about Mark Goodyear. Because when you watch a documentary, it's 4 episodes. The first episode is really kind of going in and telling the backstory. The second and third episodes are really about further investigations, working with the coroner and things like that. The victim stories, the victim's family stories, which are just heartbreaking to me. The one story I had never heard before, I can't remember his name now, but it was the son of the man who that had been murdered by her Baumeister. And what was interesting watching it is that a lot of the organizations that he worked for back in the day, like Indie Cares and things like that, there was an AIDS organization. Like, I remember, like, that organization. I remember him, like, his face and things like that. So when they told his story, his son told his story, I thought, this is such an important part of this documentary. That was what I loved about this documentary, is it no longer shamed the victims as gay men, which is something that this case has carried for years and years and years. It lifted the community up, and that was one of the things that I loved about it. And it really gave the victims and their families voices, which is something that I think has been needed for so long. And all of these shitty books and documentaries and things that have been put out, the victim stories have been so lost, and it just makes me sad. And part of the reality is that we still don't know who so many of these victims are. You know, when I was out there at Fox Hollow Farms in my vlog, he tells us 13 men, but then he says 20 men. I was told later 29 men, plus the I-70 victims, okay? In this documentary, Jeff Jellison says that there have 10,000 bone fragments, more than the number one thing that happened in the United States, which is the World Trade Center. I mean, when you think about that on that level, that Herb Baumeister, a serial killer in the north side of Indianapolis, it's hard to even find his house. When my friend Nikki came here and we vlogged it, you can't even find Fox Hollow Farms anymore. They have it, it's like houses are built in that property. My cousin told me yesterday, she goes, I'm almost positive houses are built on top of where there are like bones. So they've covered up how they're going to cover anything more, right? They would have to take down those houses. So when you think about that the next case next to it is the World Trade Center. And this is a case that has gotten no attention. I mean, one of the reporters in it says John Wayne Gacy, Jeffrey Dahmer, like this is the one you don't know about. Why? The question is why, the motive. Why has this been a case that we have never talked about when you're talking about 40 to 60 victims? Mark Goodyear says that Herb Baumeister told him 56 victims. 56 victims would make him the most prolific serial killer in the United States. And yet he has gotten no attention. Which for years I've been saying this is a case that has been suppressed. This is a case about very powerful people. Jeff Jellison coming out and talking about, we're going to open this case and we're going to get to the bottom of this, is putting him in a position where a lot of powerful people are going to be very scared. The problem is that a lot of these people have probably since passed on. We're talking about something that occurred in the mid-90s, okay? So it was 30 years ago. If people at that time were, let's say, I mean, if they were 30 to 50 years old, those people are now 60 to 80 years old. Many of them have passed on, right? Which I think is why I feel like, okay, so Mark Goodyear insinuated to my friend that there was one guy that was over all of this, and it wasn't Herb Baumeister. He doesn't say anything about this in these interviews, all right? I also asked my friend, I said, if the police reach out to me, because he's contacted the police, he's contacted the authorities, other sources have, they've never been interested in it. I said, if the police reach out to me and they say they want to know your number, he said, give it to them. He said, I'm ready to share everything with them. So the fact that Mark Goodyear told all this stuff to my friend and said that there was like this one person that was in charge of it makes me think that one person is now gone, which is why he's willing to show his face on camera. I don't know. I just think that the whole thing implicated it. The one thing that was so bizarre to me, and I went back to watch my documentary because I was like, or to watch my vlog, I was like, where did I get this information from? I went back to watch it because the story that I have always known to be true is that the police came out to Fox Hollow Farms several times to ask to search the property, okay? Herb Baumeister the first time told them no. Julie Baumeister told them, I think 2 or 3 times, that they could not search the property. They have a lake house at Lake Wawasee, which one thing I did love about this documentary was that it was like an overview of everything that's happened in the last 30 years. I mean, it was a quick let's get to it and then all new stuff. I thought that was fantastically done, the way they did it. But Julie Baumeister let them on the property in exchange for the police going and securing the protection of her son, the son that found the skeleton in the area. By the way, if you go watch the documentary, I mean, we were walking in the woods, we were by the woodpile. I mean, it was so strange. I mean, to even, like, when I watched the vlog back, I was like, this is so bizarre that I was in this house, I was in the pool room, I was in these areas. Oh, this was the other thing that happened. During the vlog, I asked the guy about the bathroom, and it's now, I guess it was a spa back then. I don't know. Anyway, he said, have you been in this house before? Which then I found out after I went to the paranormal investigation through my friend that apparently I have been to. I mean, I've been there partying at an after-hours party. The implications are so scary. And that's a friend that I'm going to reach out to because I want to find out more information about that. Because he's sober today, I'm sober today. We would like both remember things about that. Or he would probably remember more than I would because I don't remember anything about that. But maybe if he started telling me more about it, I would. I just don't remember anything about it. So anyway, so when I was watching all of this stuff, it was so interesting to me that Mark Goodyear continues to try to, like protect his name and all this kind of stuff. But the one thing about it, and this is what I was going to say, was that I went back and looked at my vlog. The owner of the story tells us that Julie wouldn't let them on the property. The owner says this, that wrote a book about it, okay? That they show in the documentary that he is like the go-to expert about Herb Baumeister. He said in there that Julie wouldn't let him on the property until the police were going to go get the son at the lake cabin. They even asked in the documentary, when they went to go get the son, why didn't they arrest Herb Baumeister, okay? And they said, well, because we didn't really have any reason to then. He fled from the cabin, okay, to Canada. That is known. That is a known fact. And at that time, he had the videotapes with him, okay? When Mark Goodyear said that as he was watching the footage of the police, this is where Mark Goodyear implicated himself. If you go back and you watch the information together, or if you watch it as closely as I have, Mark Goodyear said that when the police were on his property, he was sitting next to Herb Baumeister. I believe he said that Herb Baumeister was sitting at his apartment. Well, Lake Wawasee, where their lake cabin was, is about 2 hours from here. So he would have had to have driven 2 hours back to Mark Goodyear's apartment, then fled from Indianapolis, which he apparently told somebody that he was in Indianapolis, which means Mark Goodyear would have known that he had those videotapes with him the whole time. Then fled from Indianapolis to Canada. But what I had always heard was that he fled straight from Lake Wawasee to Canada. That's what I had always been told. That's what I was told by the owner of the house when I went there to do the vlog. That's what I've been told by other investigators. That's what I had always been told. So if he came back to Indianapolis, that 100% does implicate Mark Goodyear. Mark Goodyear also told my friend that her Baumeister had handwritten him a letter before he left. So his story's changed so much from what he's told other people to what he says online. He also then retracts his statement that he was the one sole victim. So all these years, he has said that he is the one surviving victim that got away, and that's how he ended up finding out who her Baumeister is. Well, all these years, the investigation has been built around the fact that the way they found her Baumeister was that a friend of Mark Goodyear's saw the car that Mark Goodyear told him was her Baumeister, wrote down the license plate, and that's how Mary Alice, the police investigator, found out about it. Now Mark Goodyear in this documentary is coming out and saying, I never was a victim. He never assaulted me. I made that all up. We were together for 2 years. He says in there he stalked him. But the police investigators break that down. They're like, he stalked you, but you invited him over for dinner. He was sitting on your couch the last day. How is he stalking you? You know? And so it really implicates him a lot in here. What's interesting to me, though, is that nobody takes issue with the fact that his friends were being murdered, all these people. I mean, as a gay man that didn't even know Mark Goodyear, didn't even know most of the victims, I mean, I take issue with the fact that he dated this man for 2 years knowing that what he was. He said that the first time he met him, he knew that he was a killer. But you were okay to continue to be around him for 2 years. You know, I believe in my heart of hearts, I don't know why, that Julie Baumeister did not know what was really going on. When you look at it, Julie Baumeister, he was sending up to the lake house for weeks, okay? She would be there for weeks while he was doing stuff. He cleaned everything up, and then she would come back. You know, I just don't even think it was on her radar to even think that that's what was going on, even though I heard that he was a very bizarre man, okay? I know people that knew Julie, that worked with Julie and things like that, and said she was a very nice person. She didn't want any connection to this. I mean, you know, so I think in these cases, a lot of times, it's easy to say, well, how could the family not know? Whatever. I know that the wife and the kids have suffered enough. I know that personally from stories I've heard in Indianapolis, okay? But Mark Goodyear did know. I mean, he comes out in the video and he says he knows. I mean, we have given so much criticism to serial killers, partners, and families through the years for suspecting or being suspicious. Like they said in there that they think Julie was suspicious. Suspicious of weird behavior, but probably not suspicious of a serial killer. I don't think that anybody would think that of their partner. But Mark Goodyear knew and didn't do anything. He says in there, I called the police 100 times, but they don't show any documentation of that. I was blown away by the Mark Goodyear thing. And the fact that at the end of it, I mean, I thought there would be some follow-up, like Mark Goodyear were investigating him for further questioning or things like that. I mean, it just ended. That's what blew me away about the documentary the most, you know? There was so much about the documentary that I thought was so fantastically done. I thought the way they put it all together, I thought the honoring of the victims, I think they had shown a lot. I mean, I've covered this case for 30 years. There was a lot in the documentary that I never had seen before or heard about. The back patio part, I had never seen before. Not when I was out there did I hear about that. There was a lot of witness testimony and interviews that they read. The guy from Colorado, the cold case investigator, and Jeff Jellison, the coroner, working together, I think they are going to nail what really happened. And I think it was a team effort and a cover-up that has gone on for over 30 years. And I think there have been some very important people in power that have been trying to cover this up. And I think it's left to Jeff Jellison, and I think that's his name, Jeff Jellison, and it's left up to this cold case investigator. I think they are going to finally solve this crime. And I hope to God, I hope for the victims and the families of the victims that this story, because of this documentary, which was so fantastically done, I hope that People Magazine, all these articles were written, I noticed yesterday. I was like, this is the first time that it's really getting any kind of attention other than, oh, they found more bones at Fox Hollow Farms. The owner told us they find bones out there like every other day or every other month, that they find bones out there all the time. So the fact that this case is finally getting some attention, I am so thankful for the victims and for the families of the victims. You know, and maybe the next documentary that we do about this, if we do a documentary following up on finding out what really happened, and I hope that there is a follow-up documentary of a further investigation on this, but maybe at some point we can do a documentary of all the victims and their stories and honoring the lives and the people that they left behind, because it's really the saddest part of that. And one of the things that I have talked about in all of my videos that I've done this is that the climate, okay, not just in Indianapolis, but in the United States, that at that time, that was so anti-LGBTQIA+, was so scary and allowed a serial killer to go unnoticed for years because people were unwilling to rock a boat of a family man. He was a good Christian family man. Therefore, they victimized and blamed and shamed the victims that were gay men in Indianapolis, okay? And I've said the reason why this story is so important, and I think so timely, for why it's being released right now, is that we are living in times very similar to that again, and it scares the hell out of me. Let me know what you thought about the documentary in the comment section below. I love you guys, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.